Hello and welcome back to Mesmeric Development. Today we're going to be taking a look at creating materials inside of Flax. The first thing to keep in mind is the difference between a material and a shader. So in most apps, a shader would be considered a material in Flax. And a material would be considered a material instance in Flax. So if we wanted to create a material instance to show the just simple color, right? That's all you want to do. First, you need to create a material, and then you can create the material instance to show that color. So I'm just going to call this color. Now, obviously, we can just drag out the color node and set it to a color. There will be a problem with this though. So if we just leave it to white, that would work. However, if we now just save this, and then we want to create, let's say we wanted to create a material instance here. Alright, if we wanted to set this to blue, we could try selecting the color, but there's nothing we can change. So, if we want to be able to change that value, what we need to be able to do is actually, rather than dragging it in like a normal node, we need to set a parameter. And we can change parameters in children. So, if we call this color, drag it in, delete this, drag the color into the color slot. Now if we save this and exit, we can delete the material instance 0, and I want to create a new material instance and call it, I think I want to call it blue, and create a blue texture. So now we can select the base material by either dragging it in like this, or we can also select it from the drop down. I always select itself. I selected the wrong one. Anyways, if we select the color, it's basically a shader, as you can see. So that gives us parameters we can edit. What we can do is, I said blue, so I can say okay, and now the material here, or the material instance I should say, is set to blue. We can save it, and this is normal texture that we can just apply to anything, as you can see. Alright, next up, I don't think we want to just be able to create a color. I think we actually want to be able to create some image textures. So I'm going to create a new material, not material instance, and I'm going to call it texture. Great. If we open this up, we want to be able to apply some textures. So generally, the first thing you want to be able to do for a pretty simple one is get the albedo. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to say texture, and we'll set this to the color. So I'll call it albedo here. Alright, now we can drag this in. We want to be able to do one more thing with this. We don't just want to be able to set it to an image. We want to be able to change how big the image is and how many times it repeats. So to do that, I'm going to add in a float called scale, and then we can multiply the texture coordinates by that float. So if I go scale here real quick, and I put this in here, I want to be able to multiply it by texture coordinates, so we can search for the texture coordinates. And then I want to multiply it, like I said, so we'll search for multiply, and we can multiply the texture coordinates by the scale, and let me output that result to there. Now we're going to want to use this for every single map, so I'm going to drag it up so it's a little higher so it'll be easier to get to. So all of these I'll just drag up. Alright, so what I want to be able to do next is also change what the normal and the emissive textures are, I think. So I'll create a new texture here, and I will call it emissive. This will take in an image because it's a texture, and I want to be able to drag the color here. But in addition to that, I also want to be able to scale it, so I will drag the result here down to the UVs. And now we can scale that. And next up, I want to be able to change what the normal is. So we're going to change that to a normal map here. And I'm going to call this normal. And I'm going to drag it in. Just like the other ones, we want to be able to scale this. So I will drag the result down to the UVs. And I will drag the color here into the normal. Here, let me drag this into the normal. Alright, so now we have these three maps. That should be a pretty good texture. What we can do is we can save it. Now, we're missing a little bit of functionality. I'll show you why. If we create a new material here, and I'm going to call these bricks. So, this should look pretty good. If we open this up, oh, I need to create a material instance. I'm still not used to that. Um, okay, if we create a new material instance, I should say, and turn it to bricks, what we can do is we can select the texture. And now we have these slots for the images. So I imported a brick diffuse in here, and no, we'll also bring that in there. So I just imported these earlier that I made. I can also get my normal that I did. Alright, and you can see it's blank, and that's just because the scale is at 1. It's showing 0 times. So we want the texture to show 1 time. If we wanted to do it 5 times, we could do that. I think I want it to be at like 2.5. That sounds about good. Right. So I could set it 2.5. Alright. What I want to do now is just save this. So it looks like a good brick texture. The problem is, for example, we have this emissive texture, and we can disable it or enable it, but we can't change how much it's emitting. We can't change the value of it. We can only change if it's 1 or 0 by turning it on and off. So if we wanted to change the value of that, what we have to do is we have to go into the texture, and we have to multiply the color of it, or the vector in the case of a normal. So to do that, it's pretty simple. What I want to do here is add in, first I want to be able to multiply it by a certain value. So I'm going to call this a float, and I'm going to create a float, I should say, and I'm going to call it albedo, or not albedo. We don't need to multiply an albedo, but I'm going to call it an emissive. I guess multiplier, if that's a word. Alright, now we can drag this in, and we can get a multiply node, and we can multiply the color by the value here, and then we can drag that result where it was, so into the emissive slot for emissive. Let me just copy this node here. Okay, I copied the multiply nodes because we're going to want to use it a couple more times on normal, so I'll just paste that there. And we also want to have the same for normal, so I'm going to call this normal, or no, I don't want a normal map. I will need to delete that. I can do that by left clicking and hitting delete. Alright, I want to create a float to multiply this by, so I will call this normal multiplier. Normal multiplier. Alright, now if we drag it in, we can drag that into the B slot. This goes into the A slot, the vector here from the normal. And just like we did before, we drag the multiply into the normal here. So if we go multiply normal, we can save the texture. Alright, so I am going to go and create a new brick texture. Or a new brick material, I should say. Alright, material instance, that's the word. Gosh, it's hard to remember. It actually makes far more sense to call them what they do, but I'm going to call this bricks too. It's just not normal to call them this. Alright, so I'm going to bring in the texture here, and I'm going to select my albedo, bricks. This also will take in the diffuse, and here I'm going to select my normal. Now I'm just going to set everything to 1, except for scale, which I'll set to 2.5, and it'll be just the same as it was before. So this texture right now is exactly the same. If we save this and apply it to something, we'll see there is no difference between this texture and that texture. Actually, there is, because I turned off emissive in this one. Or, wrong one. In this one. No? Which one? Anyways, in one of them, I turned off the emissive. This one, I turned off the emissive. I don't know. Anyways, that's fine. Okay, I was going to try to show you something. It doesn't really matter. Alright, so on this bricks 2 texture, what I'm going to do is, as you can see, It looks basically the same as the last one. However, now we can actually change how much applies to something, or how much a value applies. So if we wanted to increase emissiveness, let's say to 20, we can create the sun, basically, except it has bricks behind it. So now we have this very bright texture, which is emitting just a very bright thing. We probably don't want that high, but maybe it's so like, I don't know, magical wall, right? I don't know why. I did not create a light texture, so that's why I guess. If we set this to 5 or like 10 or whatever, we can just have it emit some light. There we go, that looks good. So now we have this magical wall that's emitting light for some reason. No one really knows why, but it is. And there we go. So that was a pretty simple overview of creating some simple textures with Flax. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching and goodbye.